Hi, and welcome to another session on AI and C#. Today we're not going to go to any specific code and such, but more an evaluation over the last year of AI, because 1 year ago to this date, I had not written a single line of AI code, yet alone in C#. I was a light user of ChatGPT, but beyond that, I had no clue about this. So this is a little history lesson on what have happened in just 1 year, which is kind of amazing when I put this together. And also some of the pitfalls I saw, what I did in order to learn these things. So I hope you will get some benefit out of this. So 1 year ago, September 2024, the absolute best model you could get out there was ChatGPT 4.0. It had released back in May, but it was getting more and more features, and I felt the need to learn this AI. I have heard about something called semantic kernel, which should be really, really cool to do against ChatGPT, and Azure OpenAI had come along. So these two things were the main catalyst for me doing AI. And it started out great. Chat is very, very easy. As you might have seen in my other videos, you can do it in roughly 7 lines of code to get a chat up and running once you know what to do. And it was easy to understand. And then came along some more successes, but also very much confusion. I noticed function calling, and function calling was amazing. It was a bit off sometimes because it was still AI, it was bad at counting and so on. And I found out that putting everything into function calling was very expensive, but then I learned about ChatGPT 4.0 Mini, and that solved that problem. What wasn't really solved was RAG. RAG is very difficult to understand, not the individual part, but because there is so many parts to it and how you should use it. So I really, really struggled, and I felt there was no documentation about it. Knowing what I know now, I just didn't know the right terminology about RAG. And semantic kernel was not really good at it yet at this point, but they came along very shortly after. But I found it very confusing, and it didn't really do what I wanted. Luckily, the semantic kernel office hours came along, and I saw every single one of their videos and have continued to see their office hours. So this is the semantic kernel team having a meeting every week where you can just ask questions or hear about the new features, and they're still running. So I would definitely recommend you to join that meeting if you want to learn from the best. Then I did a talk in Aarhus.net user group, which is a Nokia, and that really made me, because I needed to present, I needed to actually learn what this was about. I could still talk a little about RAG, but it was a kind of limped version what I actually showed, and that looking back at it. But something happened during that talk, and that was someone couldn't attend, so they asked, will it be recorded? And these talks are normally not recorded because we don't have the infrastructure to do that. But I thought, okay, then let's make it into a YouTube series. So I took this same talk, adjusted it slightly for YouTube, and made the Getting Started with AI in C# video series. And this is what you are looking at right now. It has continued with, after the 6 parts, people wanted more topics, different topics, and that is what you're seeing right now. So there's a lot of videos. I think it's like 25 videos out there at the moment, and I've tried to, when there is some news, to release a new video every week. But it wasn't all good and fun. I ended up into hallucination hell. I was trying to do some counting of some tasks in a Kanban board system, and no matter what I did with ChatGPT 4.0, it couldn't count. It couldn't do the things. It felt like you could only use AI for party tricks, do the talk, do the small videos in a YouTube series, but it wasn't really anything that could be trusted and have an accuracy. So, for example, I did some function calling with some files, and in the video that are up here, I told it how many files are there, and despite there being 10 files, it was very confident in there was 16 files. And this was hallucination hell. ChatGPT 4.0 was not a thinking model, so it had no clue what was going on. Actually, today I just tried that exact same demo I did up here back in October 2024, and it is almost nailing it now. If you begin to become really fancy with your prompting, it might end up with some confusions, but that's more prompt engineering than anything. But back in the day, you couldn't count on anything. So a lot of my time here was trying to get around such inaccuracy in AI. And one of the things I tried was O1. So the O1, the first preview came out in late September and was released in December of 2024. But what I found was that O1 was a very lacking model as in the preview. It couldn't do function calling, it couldn't do temperature, it couldn't do anything, it felt like. So I didn't understand the hype about reasoning models. Now I do, because the reasoning models have become good. But back in the day, it didn't really solve my hallucination hell. It just ended up being a hallucination hell that took longer because of the thinking. But it didn't stop me from actually trying to put out my first AI production feature, which was a chatbot for the company I help with some internal stuff. And that taught me a lot, going from just demos in a video to actually getting it out there, figuring out that the UI of a chatbot is actually the hardest part, not the AI itself. And in this, I also learned a bit more about RAG, still the crude version of it, but it got some data up and running by being able to look at support cases and stuff like that. But in my hallucination here, I found the fourth fundamental, as I call them: chat, function call, RAG, and structured output. And structured output, it's just a part of chat, but the thing that you can actually, instead of getting back a English language piece of text from an LLM, that you could get it back in a structured format with JSON and turn it into an object and so on. Really helped along with the accuracy, in that I could make some on-the-fly filtering where it couldn't filter on its own, but it was really good at creating the filters by itself. So structured out was a really mind-blowing experience to see, and something I use a lot still. It really replaced function calling for a while, but both of them have their merits in my book. So at this point, I felt like I actually had the fundamentals understood. RAG was a bit blurry still, but I felt I was confident enough to take a second Aarhus.net user group challenge, and that was to make a workshop for a bunch of people who wanted to learn AI. So in preparation of that, it really began to click about the RAG part. And another thing that clicked was, before all this, I knew that I now had something I could call and get some answers back, but it was too magically for me what the LLM actually did. It was about predictions, and it just predicted the next word, but it couldn't really be true that that was all there was. And it wasn't, because Andrew Karpathy, former employee of OpenAI, made probably the most important, in my mind, video about AI ever created, and the most the video I want you all to see if you have the time. And the time is 3.5 hours, talking about how ChatGPT works behind the scenes, how it's trained, how it's modeled, and so on. But it really went from, I sort of know that it's an AI, there's a magic black box there, to I finally understood AI. Not to the level of the the scientists who actually make the neural networks and so on, but actually to the point where I understood things. So it is a highly recommended video that I will link in the descriptions of this video. And at the same time, I also began to make the first reasoning model production feature. So the reasoning models that sparked this was the O3 Mini that came out. O1 was way too expensive, but O3 Mini was suddenly a model of reasoning that you could get your hands on a small budget. And I built an AI PR feature long before Copilot did, and we are using this to this day, where whenever we make a AI pull request, it will automatically do a review on that. Moving on, two more confusions came into the mix. So the .NET framework went out and claimed that they now had a Microsoft Extensions AI, MEAI, and at shortly the same time, but less notice about it, there was something called MEVD, which is Microsoft Extensions Vector Data. The last one was really important, because that made RAG really fall into place for me. In the beginning, it was confusing, while Microsoft Extensions AI was very confusing. And why in the world are they building this when semantic kernel is around? Now, and in other videos, I will talk about that. It is more clear that it's a more fundamental part of it, and doesn't really change the fact that you, in the way you work with AI, in my book. But they really confused, should we suddenly pivot to something else, and so on. But it didn't really matter in the end. And at this point, I was all about RAG. I was racking all the different sources of data we had in the company, and slowly feeding it to the chatbot. Well knowing that the chatbot was not really that great, because we couldn't really make it think a lot, but behind the scenes we could use these RAG data for other things in the system. So I began racking all the data, all the knowledge bases, and so on, to really get a feel for how RAG works. And it became really easy when SQL Server was added as a vector store. Before that, they were quite expensive or difficult to get up and running. More strange things came along. MCP. MCP had already come in October 2024, but nobody really talked about it. But during the spring, it really became popular to understand. And I understood it on principle, but I honestly didn't understand it until I actually tried to make my own MCP server. And that MCP server made it all clear that this is just hype. and it's just a protocol for function calling, and it's nothing more. I knew it was about function calling, but it felt like there needed to be more. And in reality, yes, there's other concepts, but there is no more to it at the moment. And MCP became easy. The tooling was very, very crude, but once that was in place, it became second nature to build MCP servers. Vibe coding also came along, and to me that was kind of a joke. They were really bad at it, and it didn't really feel the way to use AI in my book. For me, it was more about coding the AI than using the AI to write my code. So I tried it and felt like that was not for me. I have some LinkedIn articles about how vibe coding are disrupting my context switching and are really, really bad for my kind of work. And various studies has also shown that people feel like they are more productive doing vibe coding, but real studies actually show probably not. That will probably change at some point, but there was also these people who had absolutely no idea what coding was that suddenly said all developers are gone, and there was a really confusion and fear in the community of development what this was about. But end of day, if you don't have a logical mind, you don't have a logical mind, and slowly we are seeing that people are understanding that vibe coding isn't just for everyone. It's a tool like any other, and if you're not right for the tool, you can perhaps make prototypes, but beyond that, you really don't get far. So I abandoned vibe coding and continued my RAG. And at that point, I also got the opportunity to add my first production feature of MCP, in which I took private source code and turned it into a RAG database and exported it as MCP. So the way you can see about it is that uh, if you have an API but the source code is not available, AI need to guess if you're doing vibe coding. Again, I was not doing vibe coding, but others were. So it was a good way for the MCPs to actually get hold of the data. And that went live and is now fully live at the company I work for, where we actually see the first benefits of it. It's still early days for MCP, and MCP can be used for other things. But the main problem with non-coding MCPs is that there's really no clients to actually consume them. But MCP have a future, definitely. It's a good standard, and I will definitely be doing more with it. The final gotcha and investigation I found was Codex. So Codex is OpenAI's coding agent. Many of you might have heard about Claude Code or Google CLI, and Codex is the same just from OpenAI. And Codex, I was very skeptical about. I had tried the vibe coding in Cursor and Copilot and so on, but I tried the Codex part where you give it the task and it works even longer, and you are not allowed to look at the code while it's doing it and so on. And surprisingly, that worked. The context switching was different. The quality of the code was kind of amazing, at least for small tasks. I have a LinkedIn article about how to use Codex and comparing it to Claude Code and so on. But it really got me from this mindset of AI is in a developer tool I have to AI is actually also a code companion. I won't call it vibe coding. I will call it AI assisted code more, because vibe coding is more, in my book, when you don't know what you're doing. Here I know exactly what I'm doing, but I'm just delegating the boring tasks, the simple tasks, to a codex while I can do other things and thereby multitask. So that leaves us at September 2025. We have a ChatGPT 5 out. I didn't mark this as a big occasion, because to me, ChatGPT 5 is just a summer, a cleanup from OpenAI with all their weird models and stuff. Now we have one model that can do it all, with various knobs that we can configure if it should think long, not long, and so on. And AI have just become a natural tool in my developer toolbox. It's nothing more. Uh, every single solution I do with AI is still 80% the hard work, and then 20% the AI. AI is almost always the easy part of it. It's the GUI, it's the integrations, it's the how should it work part that is the hard part. And it has become so much better. As I mentioned, hallucination hell is gone. There is hallucinations here and there if you don't prompt enough. So prompting and AI rules is big on my mind at the moment, so we can tell the AI more specifically. Because one thing I haven't shown here is that by doing all this, I became much better at ChatGPT and in general at prompting. I knew, okay, if I asked this question, it felt natural that a human could answer it, but it made total sense that an AI couldn't when I didn't talk about it. For example, a small example today is I talked about my files in a function calling, and I asked it, please move all files that have more than 7 characters in them. And that feels natural to say, but is that with or without the extension of the file? And the AI thought it was with the extension. I assumed it was without, and it didn't give me the right result. Well, who could have known? Uh, there was not a wrong or right answer in that. It was just different interpretations of the same sentence, and that just as easily goes wrong, if not more, with humans as well. So I have three key takeaways from the first year, and the first one is try to code AI. It is the best way, in my opinion, to understand AI. I didn't understand MCP until I coded it. I didn't understand RAG until I coded it. I didn't understand structured output until I coded it. So it is a really good way of learning the AI parts. Yes, you can see all the hype videos online and just read documentation, but to really understand it, try to code it, not even if you don't need it for something, but just for the understanding. Second is that we need to expect there's a lot to be improved in the space of AI. But for those who have understood it now, and I feel like I've understood it, there's all levels of understanding. But to me, when someone say function calling, structured output, RAG, and so on, I don't need to think. I just know instantly what they're talking about. There's minute details all over the place. But when you begin to feel that, yeah, I have HTTP client in C# to call other stuff, and then I have AI to get a more an answer instead. So it's just get another API for me with some various things, and there's this little part science, part art, part of it that are different from other things, because a REST call, you can always get the same answer back. In an AI, you need to anticipate that it might not be exactly the same question or the same answer back when you use it. So, but to me, a natural tool and getting to that level will help you also in whenever a new thing comes along. And the final thing is, if you're not on board on the AI train now, jump on it now, because you will be left behind. This is something that is gonna change the world. I'm not trying to hype this. This is so important to learn, because if someone with the same skill as you and there's a job title and you don't know AI and they do, they will be infinitely better at that task, because AI will augment us all. In my book, it's not like AI is going to take over. AI is the best thing that have happened to developers, in my opinion, not our doom. I'm an optimist about AI, of course, as you can hear, but to me, you need to jump on this train. You need to go code it, learn it, understand it. You won't hit as many gotchas, especially I would have loved to not have had hallucination hell, which was a really downturn and a demotivator. Of course, we are not perfect, but it will not be perfect in a year. It will not be perfect in 5 years, but it is definitely getting better and at a higher rate that I actually expected. I talked with a former colleague about this, and he said, just you wait. He was kind of right. We are not really, we are somewhere in between our two opinions back then, but this is really, really going fast. And what have happened in just this year is really mind-boggling. And if you are on the steps of what I knew a year ago, you have a lot of catching up to do. It's easier now, but the sooner the better you get on the AI train, the better you become at understanding what all this is about. So I will leave it there. Thank you for letting me share this small evaluation over the last year. I hope some of it will make sense to you. It definitely made sense to me to make my summarize here. So hope it was beneficial in some way. And now that a year have gone and there's a new framework from Microsoft about to be released fairly soon, more about that in another video. I will actually go in and take some of my previous videos and turn them into new videos in that new framework the second I get availability to work with it as well, because lots of the videos are outdated now because of a different world back then, and I want to make it easier for you who are down here and are not on the train to actually get a jump start in a ChatGPT 5 world. So that is what we are going to see next, hopefully. So stay tuned and see you in the next one.